In the final desperate days of World War II, a single decision was made that would echo through history, completely changing our world forever. So today, we're going to dig into the story behind that choice and try to understand why, even now, it's still one of the most fiercely debated moments in all of history.
Look, there's just no easy way to get into this. You have to start with the human cost, the sheer devastation, a flash of blinding light, and in an instant, everything changed. This wasn't just a new weapon, it was a whole new kind of reality for everyone on the planet.
So the big question is, why? Why was a weapon like this even on the table? To get that, we have to rewind a bit to the final brutal climax of the war in the Pacific. The Allies were closing in. Victory seemed possible, but the price for every inch of ground was just staggering.
And that brings us to one specific place, Okinawa. Honestly, this one battle became the grim blueprint for everything that followed. For the military planners, it was like a horrifying sneak peek of what invading mainland Japan would actually look like. The resistance was just absolute, a fight to the death, no surrender.
Just look at these numbers. For the Allies, the cost was just astronomical. We're talking about almost 50,000 casualties. Think about that. One battle. It was the deadliest single engagement for American forces in the whole Pacific War. And it put a terrifying question in the mind of every general. If this is what it costs to take one island, what's the butcher's bill going to be for all of Japan?
And it wasn't just one-sided. For the Japanese military, the losses were even worse, maybe as high as 115,000 soldiers. This just hammered home that idea of no surrender. It was a mindset that you can imagine kept Allied strategists up at night.
But the real tragedy? The civilians. 150,000 Okinawan men, women, and children were caught in the middle of this meat grinder. That's nearly half the entire population of the island, just gone. This horrible fact became the very heart of the debate. Was there any way at all, to stop the war without this happening on a massive nationwide scale?
So, while all this brutal fighting is going on, something else is happening quietly behind the scenes in Washington. A new president has just taken over, and he's about to be let in on a secret. A secret project so big, so powerful, it was literally going to change the world.
Right after he becomes president, Harry Truman is pulled into a room and told about something called the Manhattan Project. Can you imagine? For years, in total secrecy, the country's best scientists had been in a race against time, trying to harness the power of the atom to build a bomb. And the crazy part, they were just about there.
And things start moving fast. Just look at the timeline here. It's almost dizzying. In the span of a few short months, FDR dies, Truman takes over, they successfully test this new weapon in the New Mexico desert, and then they issue an ultimatum to Japan. The whole thing felt like a runaway train.
And that ultimatum came with a chilling warning. The words were prompt and utter destruction. That's what Japan was told would happen if they didn't surrender. But here's the thing. How could they possibly have understood what that meant? It was just words. They had no frame of reference for the kind of power that was about to be unleashed.
So, what was Japan's response? Publicly, nothing. Silence. And that silence was interpreted as a no. So President Truman gave the green light. And just like that, the world was about to see exactly what prompt and utter destruction really looked like.
August 6th, the first bomb, nicknamed Little Boy, fell on Hiroshima. 3 days passed, still no surrender. So on August 9th, the second one, Fat Man, was dropped on Nagasaki. The number of people killed instantly was just horrifying. And that's not even counting the tens of thousands more who would die from the after effects, from the radiation for years. A few weeks later, on September 2nd, it was finally over. Japan surrendered.
So the war is over. The world breathes a collective sigh of relief. But in a way, a new conflict was just beginning. The debate. So let's try to get inside the mindset of the decision makers. Let's look at the argument for using the bomb. How on earth do you justify something so unthinkable?
Well, for supporters, it all came down to a kind of grim, terrible math. They looked at the alternative, a full-blown invasion of Japan, and the projected casualties were just mind-boggling. We're talking millions of lives, both American and Japanese. They were convinced that everyone, military and civilian alike, would fight to the very last person. So in their eyes, the bomb wasn't a good choice, it was the lesser of two awful, awful choices.
And you have to remember this key point, something that's often forgotten. The war was already unbelievably brutal. Look at the firebombing of Tokyo just a few months earlier. That was done with conventional bombs, and it killed over 100,000 people. That's actually more than died initially at Hiroshima. So the question supporters asked was, is this new bomb morally different, or is it just faster, a more efficient way to achieve the same horrible result and finally end the war?
Okay, but that's only one side of the coin. For every person who says it was necessary, there's another who says it was an atrocity. So now, let's flip it around and look at the argument against the bomb.
For the critics, it boils down to something very simple and very stark. These bombs were dropped on cities. They were designed to kill civilians, and for them, that is a moral line in the sand that you don't cross, ever. On top of that, many historians argue that Japan was basically on its knees anyway, looking for a way out, and that there were other, less horrific options that were never even tried.
And here's a huge piece of the puzzle, a real game changer. On August 9th, the exact same day that Nagasaki was bombed, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan, and their massive armies started pouring into Manchuria. Now, for a lot of people who've studied this, that was the real knockout punch. It wasn't the second bomb, it was the Soviets entering the war that finally convinced the Japanese leadership that the game was up.
So this leads critics to ask some really tough questions. Why not demonstrate the bomb's power on, say, an uninhabited island first? Let them see what you have. Or if that didn't work, why not target a purely military installation? Why was the very first move to drop it on a city full of people? It feels like they skipped right to the most extreme option possible.
It's fascinating, really. Back in 1945, things seemed so clear-cut to so many people. But that certainty, it's pretty much gone. As time has passed, how we see this decision has gotten a lot more complicated and a lot more divided.
I mean, right after the war ended, you can see here that American support for using the bomb was through the roof, 85%. You have to put yourself in their shoes. The country was exhausted by years of war, horrified by things like Pearl Harbor. To them, this was simply what it took to end it all.
But now, look at today. It's basically a 50-50 split, a perfect division. As the years have gone by, as we've learned more about the long-term effects, the radiation, that moral clarity from 1945 has completely dissolved. Now it's just a deep, profound disagreement.
And really, that's what this whole thing comes down to. It's a clash between two fundamental ideas. On one hand, you have the strategic argument, did it save more lives than it cost? And on the other, you have the moral argument. Are there some things that are just wrong, no matter what the outcome is?
At the end of the day, there are no simple answers. There just aren't. This was a decision